Amiga, do you ever feel caught between two worlds? You cherish your cultural background, pero sometimes it clashes with the realities of raising a family in modern America. You might feel pressured to fulfill traditional expectations, yet you crave a life that allows you to be your true, authentic self. If you're a Latina mom nodding your head right now, I see you and I get it. Balanced Motherhood is more than your average mommy coaching program. It's a supportive comunidad designed specifically for you. I understand the unique challenges you face navigating between generations and culturas while forging your own path as a mama. Stop feeling like you have to choose between your roots and your future. Balanced Motherhood empowers you to create a life that celebrates your heritage, embraces your motherhood journey, and prioritizes your own happiness. Spots are limited. Don't miss out on this opportunity to connect with a supportive community and create a more balanced life. Visit the link in the show notes to join the waitlist for the next Balanced Motherhood cohort. I can't wait to meet you. Hola, hola, amiga. In today's episode, we're honored to have Maritere Rodriguez Velas, a trailblazer in the bilingual parenting community, and I consider her the OG. Maritere is an award-winning author, bilingual parenting expert, mentor, speaker, writer, podcast host, parenting influencer, and a resource for Latino parents and non-native parents raising the third and fourth generation of bilingual, multilingual, and multicultural children. She is the author of 4 books for parents: Raising Bilingual Children and Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie, Raising Bicultural Children, both published in English and in Spanish, and 2 bilingual children's books, Luisito's Island, La Isla de Luisito, and I Have a Secret, Tengo un Secreto. Born and raised in Puerto Rico, Mari raised 2 bilingual, multicultural children. She lives with her Greek-American husband in Southern California. Mari discusses everything from her personal journey across cultures to practical tips for implementing a family language plan that doesn't add stress, but enriches your family's linguistic and cultural legacy. Whether you're a new parent contemplating the bilingual path or seeking inspiration to your existing strategies, this conversation is going to encourage you, filled with so many tips and advice. So stay tuned on this episode as I interview Maritere Rodriguez Velas from Latina Boomer Mom. Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of 2 on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in 2 identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, Maritere. How are you?
Hola, I'm so happy to be here. Happy to meet you virtually, I guess. One of these days we'll get to hug each other in person. But thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this opportunity to chat with you and meet your audience.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. And to be honest, I am fangirling right now porque tú eres la mera mera
Aw,
when it comes
thank
to educating and providing so many helpful resources to the bilingual community. And I'm just loving how Instagram connects so many mamas out there from coast to coast and from different countries around the world who are in the same mission of raising bilingual kids. So, gracias por estar aquí. I am very appreciative.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Before we delve into our conversation about how to raise bilingual children, I would love our listeners to learn a little bit more about you if they haven't heard of you yet. So tell us who you are and explain to us what you do.
Well, my whole name is Maritere Rodriguez Velas. Velas is spelled Bellas, so most people call me Bellas because that's the way they say it in Spanish. But my husband is actually Greek, and even though it's spelled with two L's, it's really pronounced with one L. So anyway, but I'm okay with Bellas. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I came to California to get a master's degree in communications and ended up meeting my Greek American husband here. And we went back to Puerto Rico. We got married and we came to California and made a life here. We have two grown children. They were raised with Spanish and English and with three cultures Greek, American, and Puerto Rican. And today I'm an award winning author, a bilingual parenting mentor, podcast host, and I have a platform that creates content offering information, resources, and tools for parents raising bilingual, multilingual, and multicultural children. That's me in a nutshell.
Within that, I mean, you have done so much. And honestly, you have paved the way for so many parents, specifically who are in this new generation, I would say millennial parents who are now trying to raise bilingual children. And many of us, I think, are labeled as no sabo kids or assimilated children. And mostly because we're in this first, second and a half generation wave. And many of us, though, are reclaiming our cultura. We want to bring back the language back home. And so, with you having such a great track record and many years in providing education and resources for parents raising bilingual kids, I mean, I think, like I said, you are the OG.
You're so
um,
uh,
yes. Just because I would say that people from the older generation, they were brought up differently. They were brought up in not speaking the language, and oftentimes that affected the next generation, where now some of us are labeled no sabo or we're fully Spanglish kids, where we're adding all these two different cultures. And so, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your inspiration for creating a platform and really being such a well-known individual, author, podcaster, influencer, really, in raising bilingual children? What was your inspiration?
Before I answer that question, I'm going to tell you something that my 34-year-old told me recently. He's like, "Mom, you are now helping raise the third and fourth generation of Latino children that are raising kids with Espanol Inglés." And so I thought about it, and he's right. It's no longer more the second generation; it's really the third and the fourth. Um, so it all started. My husband and I were committed to raising our kids with English and Spanish, and with our three cultures: Puerto Rican, Greek, and American. My husband grew up in Ohio, very attached to the Greek culture. I don't know how much you know about the Greek culture, although you're in Chicago, so you probably do know. They're as tight as our Latino culture is. And everything revolves in around the church, or Greek Orthodox Church. So they had all of that he grew up with. He grew up speaking Greek. His parents spoke Greek to each other. He was very close to his grandmother, who emigrated when she was like 21. She lived to be 90, and she really did not speak very much English at all. That was her choice. So the kids had to speak Greek to her. Um, and we had no resources at the time. I'm talking to you about, 25 years ago. We had no resources, and we basically used our instincts. I figure, well, I will talk to the kids in Spanish and you talk to the kids in English. Well, all these years later, that has a name. one parent, one
Yes.
language. That's one method that we'll talk about it in a minute. But anyway, so and one day it was really his idea. He said to me one day, he saw how frustrated because I was the only input and I had no books and I couldn't listen to any podcast. That none of that existed. I couldn't Google how to do this or that. So he said to me, if you have a master's degree in communications, you're an educated woman. If we are having a hard time with this, there have to be parents out there that are immigrating to this country that are having the same issues. You need to do something about it. So I called the newspaper. I had met the editor of the newspaper at the time. She then became the publisher, and to this day, we're good friends, Monica Lozano. And she had she from Mexican descent as well. So she had kids around about the same age as mine. Mine were littler, but and I said to her, unless I go to the pediatrician's office, there's no magazine or nothing in Spanish for parents that are coming here. The how do I do this? How do I do that? There's nothing in Spanish for them. And how to preserve the culture? How do I activate the language? Do I continue speaking Spanish? All those questions. And so she's like, why don't you write it? So I started writing a column that published in the paper for 12 years. And basically, I became the Google of the time because then I would go talk to the educators. I would talk to, that was the journalism background in me. I wanted facts. I wanted to talk about, yes, this is going on in my house. But let me tell you, here are some resources that you can go, some articles you can go read, some people you can, send questions to, you know, from educators to speech language pathologists to because all the myths that were going on about the confusion and the accent and the this that and the other. So I would offer this information via the column, and also some national publications like Ser Padres, which still exists today. I wrote for them. And there was a newspaper in Chicago uh, called Éxito Chicago that ran for like 5 years, and I was a columnist for them. And oh my God, I love them. I love the community in Chicago would call the editor, because in those times people can't send emails, that didn't exist yet. So they would call the editor, and the editor would call me, Mari, this parent call, and they need to know what happened, what can they do if the siblings they don't want to speak Spanish to each other, and things like that. So I would just like go and find information, use my instinct, well, this is what I would do, but let me talk to an educator, maybe they have. So I would add all that in, and from there I went to a writers conference. I knew I was going to write a book, and my book was more about culture. It was not necessarily about language. It was how to preserve the culture. And when I went to that conference in New York, the agent I talked to loved the story, but she's like, I really want you to write about language because of all the study was right off. I think I went to that conference in 2012, maybe 2013, and there were articles coming out. The Aspen Institute had done a study about bilingualism, and some other study that I'm escaping who did it, but it was about how we all are born with a multilingual brain. So all that's now, and she's like, I think we need a book in Spanish and English about raising bilingual, and we want to call it that way, raising bilingual children. So I set out to talk to all the experts I could find. They were some dual immersion schools that were emerging. And so I talked to the principal, the head of school in Utah, for example. And then in California, there were a few, but I wanted the book to be more nationally, you know. And then some
Sure.
programs that were in Europe that were kind of coming into the United States. And then I would talk to families that were going through and they would give me their experience. So that's what the book is about. It's called Raising Bilingual Children, Cómo Criar Niños Bilingües. And it was published in 2014. And then right after that, I published Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie, Raising Bicultural Children, which was my original story, story. And it's interesting, Jessica, because this was never intended to be my story. I wanted a book, two books that I have. Well, the two books, I wanted them to be about what was happening. It wasn't necessarily about me, but I had an amazing mentor that passed away 5 years ago. He was my husband's best friend. I just to this day, and he was professor at UCLA in LA for many years. Very well known. Yeah, I can go on and on about me and about him, but I gave him the first three chapters of both books just so I could get his perspective. And the first time he read the one, he said, "Where is your story on this?" And I'm like, "But it's not my story." And he goes, "It's your story because the reader wants to know how you did it. Just like you in your
Mm.
column, they want to know. And that's going to be more significant to them that, along the way in each chapter that you cover, that it, whatever topic it is, that this is how you dealt with it." So in both books, and it ended up being kind of my story, and I'm proud of it. I was very honest and transparent in whatever happened. I now can tell you that my experience was not perfect. My children always spoke English to each other. I could not get away from that as much as I tried. I didn't have the online classes and all this stuff, tutoring and all that I could. And my husband
Right.
didn't speak the language, so that made it harder. Uh, but I think that's why I'm in such a mission to help, younger parents like you to really be more intentional and be committed. And that's when along the way I learned to have a language plan. And I know you want me to talk about that. So you tell me when to stop.
Yes, well, that was my next question. Yeah, and you have shared this so many times, and a lot of people in this community talk about that each family should create a family language plan, especially if you are thinking in raising bilingual children. And so, can you tell our listeners a little bit more what that is and how they can start implementing it? Is it ever too late to start implementing it? And what are the benefits really of utilizing a family language plan?
So a family language plan is like a roadmap that helps parents stay on task, accountable, committed. It is a different plan for every family because every family is different. Your circumstances are not the same as mine. Your routines are not the same as mine. Your native language is not the same at mine. The level of language is not the same, for example. So that's why it's a different plan for everyone. There's no cookie cutter plan that, here, Jessica, use this, and here you use the same over here. No. Um, and, that plan is going to include the methods that you're going to use, the strategies, the day to day routines, the resources that you're going to use, the tools, and the support. Everything needs, everything that you need to support that journey that you have decided to go in. And why do we raise bilingual children? Well, because it's a gift we give our kids. Studies have demonstrated the benefits and the advantages of being bilingual and biliterate, from cognitive development to better attention span to social skills, better memory, visual and creative skills, They're all important developmental aspects that parents might want to consider. Um,
Mm.
so, that's in a nutshell why we would want to raise bilingual or preserve the native language.
Right. Yeah. And what happens if either families don't create a family language plan, or if they think it's too late to implement the language? And I don't know what the age is, like when kids learn a secondary language much faster. I don't know if it's within the first 6 or 7 years. I'm
Yeah.
probably just like
It's
spitting out a
early
number,
out.
but
It's you know what? The
yeah,
earlier the better. I mean,
sure.
you should make that decision even your babies before the baby's born. And then because that's going to make you be more committed to it. And then, if you don't want to do a formal language plan, at least have some kind of outline, something to help you with. Because it really is helpful. And so at least it's something that will keep you going every day, and that you can look at and say, okay, so I did this today, maybe tomorrow I'll do this other. So, it just has everything in there. And I'm a planner. So that's how I came up with the family language plan. I have like to-do lists of what I do. And that helps me stay on task and help please stay
Mm.
organized and helps me stay, like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do this week. And every day I'm doing that. And, it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be like, oh my God, if I walk off the plan for one day, you did something wrong. You don't. You don't. But the sooner the better, but we can all learn a language at any age. So it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. I mean, my friend Frances Evans, who has Discovering Espanol, she has a platform too, and she teaches. Her son started when he was 4, and he's 13 now, and he's completely bilingual. So, I think it all depends on how committed. So the age doesn't matter. What matters is what goes after that. Once you make the
Mhm.
decision, how committed are you? How intentional are you? Are you creating that connection with the language? Are you making it fun? Are you being excited about it? Are you also being a good example and reading in the language? All those things are helpful. And
Yes.
and then, once you decide to do it and yes, I'm going to have a plan or I'm going to have an outline, then, you know, research the methods. What are the methods out there? We talked about it earlier. The one parent, one language, it's the most popular one. It is not the most effective one. And in my humble opinion, and someone else agreed with me the other day, who she is a linguist, which I am not. I'm just talking from experience and from the knowledge I've acquired for the last 25 years. But sometimes the one parent, one language, OPOL, OPOL, it's good for a little while, and then you have to switch, and that's okay. Then you have the minority language at home, which is usually when both parents speak the minority language inside the house and they're committed
Mhm.
speaking Spanish all the time. Because when the kid goes outside, he's going to have the majority language or the community language, depending on what you want to call it. And then the third method that has become popular, it's called time and place. And this is common for parents that are raising multilingual kids, and where they choose the time and day or the time of place where they are going to speak or practice that second or third language. For example, every Saturday and Sunday, everything is in Spanish, or everything is in French, or everything is in German, depending on what the la meta is, what the target language is. And it is also helpful. I just had a little video about this, my video consejitos. Um,
Yes.
it's very helpful when the kids, are between 9 and 12, and everything is about their friends, and they don't want to be different from their friends, and they just want to speak English. Well, okay, I get it. But let's just make a commitment as a family. that Saturday and Sunday, we are going to speak Spanish solamente. Or at dinner time, it could be one time during the day. At dinner time, we are going to speak Spanish. Toda la, while we eat, while we sit around after la sobremesa, let's just speak in Spanish. And at least one day, and you do that so you give the child a little time to
Mhm.
adjust and to learn and to accept the fact that being bilingual is a wonderful thing. So you're
Right.
just buying time, which is fine. It's
Right.
okay because it's really not about forcing the kids. You don't want that. You know, it's
Mhm.
if you make it like a chore, they're not going to want to do it. So
Yes, yes. That is such a good point.
yes,
Yes.
be fun, and you have to, you know, I, I always tell parents is, you have to have good attitude about it. If you have a good
Mm,
attitude about it and you're like, oh my God, this is what our family does, and you're always positive about it, and you're a good example, they're gonna take your cue. And if they're in the mid-teens and the teens and they want to come and talk to you, I had this conversation with Caro Mejia, one of the moms that I adore, and her son, one of her sons, is doing that. It's like doesn't want to speak Spanish, so she's like, "Hey, he isn't going to be a teenager. I want him to continue talking to me. So if he wants to talk to me and share things that are happening at school, and he wants to do it in English, I'm okay with that because I want him to keep communicating. So if once
mm,
if at least once a day we have the Spanish, I'm okay with that until, and it's so true, because eventually they'll understand. They'll come to you and they go, gosh, mom, I'm so glad that you were so intentional about me learning Spanish. They will. Trust me, they will.
right. Yes. Yes, como les da curiosidad later on. And I see that with my nephew who will be 13 later on this year, which I've seen him literally when he was born hours later after, my sister had him and yeah, he's mostly English dominant because my sister and brother-in-law it's just organically. They just express themselves, talk to them in English. But then when we had our kids, specifically Diego, who's 3 years old, our plan was just to speak to him all in the native language. So we have that second method, I guess the
Minority
minoritized
language.
language.
Yeah, minority language. I may
Yes.
tell.
Yes. Yeah, ese plan. And so it's so funny how now both my niece and nephew, even though they never spoke a word in Spanish, never hearing them conversate with any of of their primitos or anyone in Spanish. Now they're all of a sudden talking to my little kids in Spanish because they know and respect that our kids are only speaking Spanish, and that's how they are being very like pretty much immersed into the language. And so now my nephew's like, "Mommy, I want to know more Spanish. Like ya le da más curiosidad."
Me encanta.
And
Encanta.
yeah, it's so amazing.
And you know what I was going to tell you in this plan. So you develop the plan. Doesn't matter what, when, but you research the methods that they're all out there. Just Google methods, and they're like, and if you want to send me a DM, I'm happy to send you some, or the suggestions. And then you add the strategies that you're gonna use, the routines like reading, and when you're in the kitchen and cooking, and everything is the music you're gonna listen to, and then always remember you want to tell your family that this is what you want to do. It takes a village. Trust me, it takes a village. You need that village to support it, just like your nieces and nephews are doing with you. That is such a huge support to you. And that is helping your little kids so much. And as an adult, you, the parent doing this, you don't feel so alone doing this. So
Right.
it really takes a village. Everyone around you should be part of this, not only your family, but Your neighbors should know about it, your teachers, your friends. That support is invaluable and you need that. And then lower your expectations and don't compare. Your
Yes.
children are not going to learn at the same level as my children or the children next, the neighbor next door. They're just, every child is different. So we have to, remember, like, don't be, oh, but they have so many more words than my kid does. That's okay. They're going to catch up eventually. They'll be fine.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
should just make sure that, there's commitment, there's consistency, there's intention, but above all, flexibility, my friends. We have to be
Mm,
flexible. One
yes.
day you didn't, speak as much Spanish as you wanted to, you start over the next day. It's okay. It's okay. I think what the kid needs to see is that you do have the commitment, that you do it every, as often, that that you have a plan, that this is what we do in my house. And also try to find friends that are in the same boat you are, because you need
Mm,
those friends and you need to go to the park once or twice a week, and all the children are playing in Spanish and the parents are talking in Spanish. I mean, how fun is that? Um, and
yes.
that's just, making it fun and natural. It's part of as part of their daily routine. I call it naturally bilingual. Super
Mm,
important. And then the resources, there's so many resources out there, many bilingual parents communities in Facebook, on Instagram. They offer a lot of, support and resources for the everyday parenting. And, that's something that I
right.
wish I had had. But there's speech language pathologist communities. They're all bilingual, like, bilingual speechy and Laleo bilingual
Yeah.
therapy. And then there's Billy Kids and Niños and Nature, bilingual play date. I mean, there's a whole bunch. If your listeners want to send me an email, I'll send them a list of, some of the most popular ones for free. I'm happy to share with them. And, don't remember that technology in this case can be an asset, because those
Mhm.
FaceTime opportunities that they have with the grandparents is huge, and so is the Zoom meetings. And there's so many fun things you could do. You could cook with abuelita in her kitchen and your kids in your kitchen, and talk to abuelita about your day, or a new friend that, I mean, there's a lot of conversations that can be happening that are so helpful. I mean, once or twice a
Yeah.
week, and that exposure,
Yeah.
especially if you don't have the family near you. But
Exactly.
like your cousins, if your cousins didn't live, your nephew or nieces, if they didn't live next to you, they could talk to your little 3-year-old on the FaceTime, and talk to him in Espanol. And it doesn't have to be a long conversation, but his ear is, and he's learning the vocabulary, and that's what we want. We want
Right.
them to, when they're little, to expand their vocabulary and add words to their word bank.
Exactly. Yeah, and I find it interesting how many parents, at least the people in my family, the other day I had a cousin who told me, "Oh, my girls just don't want to know the language, like they don't want to speak the language." But kind of going back to, I don't know if it's your formula about like consistency, flexibility and all of those action words that you provided. I think that we also need to do our part. Like sometimes it's understandable though that kids don't want to speak the language because they're very intentional to. Like they're probably like, I'm not going to speak Spanish. They're probably rebellious or they don't feel comfortable, and sometimes we need to respect that. But to what point do we actually know, okay, am I just going to call it quits, or how can I sort of go back and be more intentional? Like, is it ever going to be a perfect moment where you can kind of like get back into like this specific routine and immersing them into the language? What are your thoughts about that?
My thoughts, when if a child is old enough to tell you that they don't want to speak Spanish, they're old enough for you to have a simple conversation about why you want them to learn the language or preserve the language or be able to speak the language. Very simple. I mean, you can sit down and explain. You can sit down and Google, why should a child speak Spanish or speak a second language? And go over some things, and very simple. Don't go into a long conversation. Short and sweet. This is why mommy wants you to speak Spanish. It's important to me. And leave it at that. Not harp on it, or just. And if you have to repeat it, you know how kids are about repetition. So if you have to repeat the same thing again the next day, that's okay. And then move on. Move on and find out, your child better than anyone, but what is their interest at that time? Does he like sports? Does he like music? Does he like cooking? What is that interest that you can bring the Spanish to, or the language to? What is that interest that you can go to the library with him and say, how about if we pick up a baseball book in Spanish? Let's learn about a baseball legend like Roberto Clemente. I just say that because he's my legend and I'm writing a book with
Yeah.
no, but you know what I mean. You find that thing that sparks his interest, he's that he loves. If he comes home, wanting to read the same kind of book because it's about some kind of message or some kind of person, then try to find the Spanish comparable to that, or that athlete that he would want. A lot of the kids love sports. So there has to be a sports person out there that you can share, and that, maybe there's a Spanish book that you can read about him. And maybe it's not in English, in Spanish yet. Read it to him in English. You're still talking about the culture of that, of his culture. So it's okay for you to share that book in English. I'm telling you this because I just saw there is a book about Roberto Clemente. It's a biography, and it was published in 2008. And that was a long time ago. But it's in English. And I feel like that's okay to read to a 4 to 8 year old, because you're still teaching him about the culture. And this is the way this person was. And eventually you can possibly by now find a book in Spanish. And then you say, guess what? I found a book. Let's read the Spanish version, or this one that is in Spanish, and learn more about Roberto. And the child is going to be okay with that. I guarantee.
Yeah.
So I think, making it more like you're not mad, you're not upset, you understand. I know that you want to speak English, all your friends speak English, but just remember how, this is important to mommy, and it's important because I know one day you're going to love it. And then leave it at that. And, the next time you try something, I know it's a lot of work, but the good thing is that there are a lot of us out there that you can now go and try to find out, oops, this is happening. Let me see what Latina Boomer Mom is, what does she say? Or let me see what my little playdate is doing with her 3-year-old and her baby, in your case. Or let me see what La Leo is, because she has 3 different levels of children. So it helps. I now follow a woman. Well, she found me, I think. Her Instagram account is My Beautiful Blunder, and she has twin girls and then a little girl that she posts a lot about her videos, and her dad speaks to this little girl in English. She speaks to her in Spanish because she's from Mexico. And let me tell you, they do a really good job. And so it can be done. And there are places out there that we can go looking for ways to do it. And, I think that the most important thing is our decision. Is this what we want to do? How intentional do I want to be? And let's just get started. Let's get them. And one thing that I want to remind everyone is, when you do this plan or this outline, if you don't want to call it plan, oh, remember that your child is going to grow. So that I would say at least twice a year, like in June, I already tell parents in June, it's time to review your family language plan because the child's interests change and everything changes. They're also going through a development. So they're going to change. And what worked for him or her when they were 3 is not going to work the same when they're going to be 4 or when they're going to be 5 or when they're going to start school. So it's good to
Right.
review and change resources, find other resources that work, find tools that would work, depending on the age group.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is so helpful. I didn't realize that your plan can change. And I think it makes sense, especially when your kiddos are going through transitions. Like I'm thinking about our 3-year-old, like he's going to start preschool in the fall. And we are going to sign him up for dual language,
Right.
but for pre-K 3, there's no dual language technically. And I worry because he's Spanish dominant. And so, y a veces le da curiosidad, like, he's like, "¿Cómo se dice jugar en inglés?" And I'm like, "Play." So now como que le da un poquito de curiosidad,
Mhm.
but I often wonder if he's gonna feel a little isolated or if he's gonna be just in a group of Spanish dominant kids and not be friends with monolingual students too. And so these are my worries right now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a 3-year-old.
No.
But I guess I didn't realize about changing your plan también.
Yes, no, it changes. And well, 2 suggestions I have for you. Number 1, find out if there's going to be more other Spanish dominant kids in that class. There has to be a way
Okay.
that you can find that out. The second
Yeah.
thing I'm going to suggest, once you find that out, see if you can find out who the teacher is and have the conversation. And the third thing that I'm going to suggest is why don't you get a hold of some flashcards that have certain words that you can practice over the summer? And maybe one day a week, it's your English, you know, where you are teaching him certain words that he's going to know, immediately he's going to learn the language right away. So I'm not worried about him. But if that may make you feel better and maybe it'll give him a little bit more confidence to feel like, oh, I'm going to go
Mhm.
in there and I'm not going to know any words in like I'm sure he's not thinking about this, you are, but it could be helpful. It could be helpful to have a little session every week where you let's tonight let's just practice English words because you're going to
Yeah.
come up with these words and maybe ask that teacher or that school if they can suggest some flashcards that you can use. Find ask bilingual speechy. She just came up with some cards, so she's a good contact. And the other contact that went through this and you would want to talk to is Deandra at Bilingual Playdate because she did just this last year where her son grew up only Espanol and he has to go to, and now I've seen and we've talked about this that her teacher is super supportive of all the Spanish. I mean, there's Spanish stuff around the classroom, Spanish words and stuff. And that's so wonderful. Like, that's the thing. Your
Mhm.
teacher, once a kid starts school, you have to remember that the teacher and you are a team. And,
Yes.
that benefits the child so much when there's that communication and that relationship between the teacher and the parents.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I totally forgot that Deandra, her kid is like a year older than mine. And I remember her sharing that about how she is also being a part of her son's like educational experience to making sure that he doesn't feel like left out or any different. And I actually heard of this similar topic in a way on NPR about this mom, like both parents were like, yes, we're gonna speak to our kids only Spanish and that way they can be fully immersed. But then they receive this level of dissonance once their kids start school because depending on the school, they may essentially label their kids.
Oh, this
And
is
and depending on the school district too, ¿verdad? Because not all schools are created equal. Essentially what that woman said was that her kid had to go to this like special type of ELL classroom environment, and now she felt guilty for raising her kid Spanish dominant.
and that's so wrong in so many levels.
Yes.
And what needs to
Yes.
happen is that we as parents need to be very educated, very upfront,
Mm.
very like in their faces, and just say, no, we need to change this system. We need to make this a place where our bilingual kids are comfortable and are going to be happy and are going to be, evaluated as a bilingual kid, not as a,
Yes.
English learner or what, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, it has taken a long time for there's some districts and some states have changed, but we still are dealing with this, and it's really sad because we should be everywhere in the United States. Every single school, every single district should be bilingual. They should have a bilingual
Yeah.
program. They should have Spanish as part of their curriculum from the kindergarten on, not only starting in middle grade. It should be from
Mhm.
kindergarten on. So yeah, I get in a soapbox when it's like, as I'm so passionate about it, it's like, oh my God, really? We're gonna wait until they're in fifth grade to add Spanish? No.
Right, and sometimes even high school, and then they do the language immersion in high school, only 4 levels, if that's, the minimum sometimes, and then they go to college, and guess what? They can test out if they take AP, and even though that is helpful, especially for heritage speakers, still it's like, well, do you lose the language? Like, and I think that obviously it's up to people's choices, and decisions if they want to continue on with still continuing on with the language. But I just find it interesting how all of a sudden there's this like huge sort of wall that, you can no longer proceed in following up with the language after high school. And that is very intriguing to me. It's just because I feel like a lot of times families are working so hard, especially in the primary middle school years. Y ya, para qué?
I know.
So
Well,
I know this
my
education
my
system
daughter
is.
ended up going to she was a lucky girl. But I was so adamant about it. I kept, she grew up with me saying, you need to have a semester abroad, you need to go to Spain, and you need to, practice your Spanish. And she did. She went to Madrid, and it was the most amazing experience. And having conversations in Spanish with my daughter was just one of those life experiences that I will never forget, because it hasn't happened since. We talk Spanish a little bit here and there, but when I went to see her in Madrid, and we had really long conversations all in Spanish, and it was amazing. She lived with a family that were great to her, and so it's just all these different things that that we can do to promote the language and the culture. And I'm just saying to all the young parents out there, if you have an opportunity to preserve the language, do it. Language is a magnificent tool to instill the love of culture. That's
Mm.
my thing.
I love it. And I was actually going to ask, like, do you have any tips for like new parents or soon to be mommies who are thinking about raising their children bilingual?
I would say start, following all these young moms out there that already are doing it, and have pages on Instagram. There's a big bilingual parenting community that you and I belong to, and there's a lot of parents from different age groups. So even the ones that are, barely having a baby, or are, pregnant and haven't had the baby yet, lots of good tips in there, lots of good resources. Always feel free to send me a private message, and I'll send you, to different places. And but I just we know so much. We have so much education out there that it would be sad if you choose not to raise a bilingual child. And you don't have to be a native to raise a bilingual child. Look at
Yeah.
News and Nature. She's raising 3 children. She's now moving to Costa Rica. And I just think it just, it makes me so happy to have this non-native community of parents that understand. And I, to some degree, I think a lot of these parents realized it or accepted it even earlier than our Latino parents. So it really is amazing to me that there is that whole community of non-natives that understand and want their kids to be bilingual. Sometimes you go, like it happened to me, you go to a dual language immersion school and there's a long list of waiting, there's a waiting list because there's a lot of non-native parents that are got in before you did. So you need to
Right.
remember that. But I think it's
Yes.
great. I think, children, our children in the United States should, every child should know at least 2 languages fluently.
Right. And I think we are so behind as a
Oh,
country because the majority, I would say the rest of the world are at least bilingual. I mean, obviously, English is probably their second language because it's the majority language.
not till wait for 2050. Spanish is going to be right up there.
Yes. Okay, good, good. Yeah, but I think that it's very important. Yes, even though this country doesn't have an official language, if you will, like I think that's our leverage, right? To be bilingual, trilingual, multilingual. And I think that that is, it can start now as mamas and having that intentionality and having this family language plan, which I love, and I think that yeah, we should start implementing and obviously following people like you, porque like I said, you have paved the way not just for us, but our future generations as well.
I always feel like, we have to get away from feeling like it has to be perfect because nothing is perfect. We
Yeah.
all do the best we can. My parents did the best they could. Your parents did the best they could. So we just have to remember that, no judgment. We do it our way, and that's that. And then just, just be kind to yourself, and this this should not be something that is causing you any more stress. Parenting is already stressful, so let's just do it in a way. That's why this plan is different for everyone, because you have to consider, how can I do this that is not going to add any more stress in my life. And yeah, it'll make you feel stressful at some times because you maybe did not do it correctly. But you know what?
Mm.
Let me just leave you with this. I know that if my kids are dropped somewhere where they only speak Spanish, they will be fine. They will be able to
Yes.
speak Spanish. So that's how it works.
Yes. That is great. Absolutely. Yes. That is such a great reminder. Thank you. And Maritere, I didn't prepare you for this question, but I ask all of my guests on the Viva la Mami podcast, how are you redefining motherhood?
Woo, that's a good question. I think I already did. No. um, I think that, like I said before, we all look back, like, when we become moms, uh we all look back at our moms. How was I raised? Some of them are a lot of trauma. Some of them, we all had gone through. So childhood was not perfect for everyone. And I think that the way I did it is, I used the best of what my mom did, the best of what my mother-in-law did, and then I added my twist to it. And that seemed to work. And it wasn't perfect, but it worked for us. And I think that we all have to keep that in mind, that, we all do the best job we can, and it's okay. It's okay. And as long as we always keep, first of all, keep our sanity. So self-care, ladies out there, moms, that's super important. Even if it's 5 minutes a day, lock yourself in your closet or go in your bathroom or something, but you need that time to take a little break. And because, we have to be, we can't be good moms if we're not good to ourselves. We need to be good to ourselves in order for us to give the best of us. And if we don't take time and it's all about the kids, 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 te gastas. I mean, you're going to be exhausted. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the way I would redefine what I did. I used the best of both my mom and my mother-in-law, whom I adore. I mean, she was amazing. And I know that a lot of people don't like their mother-in-laws, but I love mine. So it works for me. But I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes too. And, be, I'm just, I think about it now. And like we were talking about it before the show, we started recording. Um, Now that my kids are older, I have had these conversations with them lately. I think that's why it's so fresh in my head.
Yeah.
Because I think that if I could do it over, I would have raised them in Puerto Rico and not in California. And
Mm.
I just think that. And I don't regret anything. We are all where we're supposed to be. But I think that it's it was hard for me to accept that my kids love Puerto Rico, love it, but they're never going to love it the way I love it because
Mm.
they didn't grow up there. So,
Mm.
we all do the best we can as moms. So,
Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it is important to I think motherhood and just in general, it's like a blend of who you are and what you see it from influential people, like in this case, your mother-in-law. And yeah, and you kind of do a little bit of your own flavor, if you will, or sass. I think of one of my professors, he mentioned making macaroni and cheese. You get a little bit of this, a little
yeah,
bit of that
that,
from different
yeah.
recipes, and then you make your own. And that's the way motherhood is, really. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing. I again appreciate you being here. And where can my listeners follow you?
Oh, I am on all the platforms, but Instagram is Latina Boomer Mom. Instagram and Threads, I kept that name. And then everywhere else is Maritere Rodriguez Velas or Maritere or Velas. And, X or Twitter, LinkedIn. I have a website and all that. So, anyway, it would be super nice to hear from your audience. And yeah, if they send me an email, I have a resource list that I can send them. But I really appreciate you inviting me. It's been super fun talking to you. And you're like one of my girls because you're all in the same age group as my kids. So I keep adopting girls. I keep adopting you guys along the way, and I love that. I love that.
Oh, thank you. Gracias. I really appreciate it. And I'll make sure to share all of your contact information to the show notes. And that way people can follow you if they have not. Otherwise, they're missing out.
Thank you so
So
much.
thank you.
Thanks.
Mujer, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, will you do me a favor and follow the podcast and leave a rating and review? Hitting that follow button and reviewing my show will allow other mommies like you find this podcast. Your review will also tell me if you enjoy the show, so I would truly appreciate your thoughts. Don't forget, please share this podcast con tus amigas. Also, make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. Okay, mujer, thank you for joining y nos vemos in the next episode.